Halloween 1999. Kids across America go door to door looking for their favorite candy bars. No Hershey's chocolate bars, no Kisses, no Reese's. The shelves are empty. Now, here is the strange part. Hershey's has it all, sitting in warehouses. The problem? They spend $112 million on a software system that couldn't find it. This is how one software decision cost Hershey's Halloween. Now you may ask, what does a decision made by Hershey's in 1999 have to do with my business today? The software boom of the late 90s has a lot of similarities with today's AI boom. So the question is, have we learned from our past mistakes, or does history repeat itself? Before we go into details, Milton S. Hershey founded Hershey's in 1894. What started as a small chocolate business grew into the biggest candy company of North America within a century, shipping billions of candies every year. With Y2K in sight, management decided to carry out a massive digital transformation. For those who don't know, Y2K has to do with the fear that all computer systems would fail once the calendar flipped from 1999 to 2000. Hershey's investment into new software was $112 million, and the timeline estimation was 48 months. At least that was the recommendation based on industry standards. Hershey's looked at that recommendation and thought, we can do better. How about 30? Apart from the Y2K reason, shareholders were also applying pressure on management. So, management decided to prove their speed, shortening the timeline without incorporating their tech department's opinion. The go-live moment was set to July 1999. Mind you, Hershey's busiest period in business is end of summer. This is because their best period of sales starts with Halloween, lasting until the end of the year. Moving on, their digital transformation consists of 3 parts. First, a new ERP system, the SAP R3 system, a new CRM by Siebel, and a new supply chain management system by Manugistics. Instead of going for a phased approach, Hershey's wanted all the systems to go live at the same time. To achieve the 30-month deadline, Hershey's had to cut some processes short. These processes were testing and employee training. Better yet, some teams never even received any official training before cutover. On top of that, teams and their executives lacked time to focus on the digital transformation. This pressure nearing cutover started the collapse of communications between departments, causing active conflicts. Hearing this, alarms should be ringing all over the place right now. This goes against everything that we discussed in last week's video. But what if I told you this is not everything? They made even worse mistakes. Whether it was the pressure from achieving the project in time or other reasons is unclear, but data migration from the old systems to the new has been inaccurate from day one. After everything was live, Hershey's had to make up for all the mistakes they made during lead up to cutover. This meant that Hershey's was still in fix mode until mid-September, which allowed the following disaster. During peak seasons, Hershey's made use of informal storage locations for excess storage. Hershey's increased inventory by 25%. Now, inside the company, this was common knowledge. Everyone knew where everything was. However, this wasn't recorded in the ERP. For the ERP to be effective, it needs to know all locations of inventory, since it can only look for what it knows. Retailers were placing orders, and the ERP returned, "We are out of stock." So Hershey's lost out on sales, a lot of sales. Orders didn't go through, causing empty shelves even though warehouses were full. What happened? As the title suggests, Hershey's lost out on $100 million in sales. They lost valuable shelf space and fulfillment time doubled. This loss meant a 12.4% drop in revenue compared to the year before, and if you thought that was bad, their stock price dropped by 8% in one day, resulting in a 19% decrease of quarterly profits. Yikes. Of course, Hershey's found its way to the front page of the Wall Street Journal, sparking debates on how difficult it is for big enterprises to adopt new software and whether it is even worth it. Analysts even doubted Hershey's all the way until next Halloween. As Kenneth Wolf said, Hershey's CEO at the time, enterprise software isn't just software. It requires changing the way you do business. And 27 years later, that still holds value. Before we dive any deeper into this case study, who am I and why should you listen to me? Well, my name is Mahmoud Uygun. I studied computer science and industrial engineering. After graduating, I started working as a consultant implementing government tech software for more than 150 organizations, with every one of them resulting in success. Now, I'm also co-founder of Okium, where we help e-commerce businesses prepare their operations and scale them with software. And this is how I would analyze this case. In the previous video, we went over the 10-20-70 rule, where we established that technology affects a digital transformation success by 10%, data and tech stack by 20%, and people and processes by 70%. If last week's video was too abstract for you, I'm sure this Hershey's case will clarify everything. If you haven't watched it already, then please click here somewhere. Everything I'm going to say now will make more sense after watching it. To analyze Hershey's decision making, I broke down the 10-20-70 rule in 5 important aspects that play a role in digital transformations. How much does your team rely on spreadsheets or manual work because your systems are too slow or complex? It is only right that we start with process. Hershey's flat out failed here. It started with the decision to compress the timeline from 48 months to 30. Combined with an all-at-once transition instead of a phased approach, shows that the decision-making process and its design failed. Input from the tech department here is crucial, and there wasn't any that management took into consideration. But that's not all for process. Last week's redirection question is also relevant here. Proper education of the workforce makes or breaks a digital transformation of this scale. Management cut training short and even skipped it for some teams. That is asking for problems. Also, cutting test phases short is a process shortcut that you can't afford to make, which led to Hershey's having to fix issues after the fact during peak demand season. Looking at communication issues between teams, it's easy to state that Hershey's culture broke down as well. Active conflicts in an organization is a clear indicator of a split. Especially during such transitions, communication between teams is key for success. And as obvious as it may seem, solving issues demand focus on those issues. With executives scrambling for time, this indicates a clear governance failure. And the most obvious failure of them all, lack of auditing the informal storage locations, which is a perfect display of the shadow spreadsheets example I gave in last week's video. Data. Do you have one reliable place for your sales and inventory numbers? I mentioned earlier that the data migration from the old systems to the new has been inaccurate from day one. So this needs no further explanation. In Hershey's case, they migrated data errors from day one. With all 3 systems going live at once, Hershey's needed cohesion between the systems and data for them to work. The testing missed creating a clean baseline for data usage across those systems. On top of that, the informal storage locations is a peak example for data unreliability. Increasing inventory by 25% and none of it is visible, need I say more? And a lack of one source of truth when retailers need accurate stock information, it was bound to fail. Software. Does your software remove work from your team or create more of it? This may surprise you, but this is the only success of this case. SAP R/3 had a great track record for enterprise systems during that time. So did Managistics and Siebel for their systems. The systems also functioned as designed and there were no errors. So the technology wasn't the cause for any failure. In fact, post-recovery in 2001, Hershey's used the same technology and did get it right that time. But that's for another video. Team. Does your team actually use the tools you bring in? They use the tools all right, but not out of belief, more out of compliance and necessity. Remember, the employee training wasn't enough, and some teams never even received any before cutover. It is hard to build belief in a new system when the culture doesn't reflect it. No change management, communication errors between teams, conflict even. When executives should lead by example, they disengaged. Other priorities led near cutover, so it is not surprising that employees felt the same. How can you expect for teams to use tools and collaborate when the people responsible for making the technology work were the least prepared? The 70%, it was nowhere to be found. Growth. If your order volume increased 10x by tomorrow, what would happen? This question seems ironic now because there was chaos even with knowledge of increased order volume, let alone if it were to happen out of the blue. Hershey's went live in July 1999, a couple of months before their busiest trading period. Yet there was no buffer in timeline and no real fallback plan if it all failed. And this is because of the all-at-once approach. Hershey's did prepare with extra stock, sure, but still couldn't fulfill the increase in order volume. Retailers placed orders, received nothing, and turned away. Forget scaling. The operations crumbled under expected seasonal volume. Time for the verdict. The only positive in this case study was the choice of tools and that the software was industry standard. Other than that, it becomes difficult to find anything positive to state here. On all other accounts, Hershey's failed across the board. And as I said in last week's video, the technology is rarely the issue. And in Hershey's case, everything around it was the issue. They spent $112 million on the 10% and they spent nothing on the 70%. In fact, they even took away resources from the 70% by putting it under extra pressure to succeed 18 months faster. The goal of this case study was to answer the question, have we learned from past mistakes or does history repeat itself? This statistic from McKinsey speaks volumes here, so it is worth repeating. 8 out of 10 companies deploy AI, and again, 8 out of 10 companies see no material impact. Other than that, in 2025, 42% of companies have abandoned their AI initiatives, which is a steep increase from 17% in 2024. And only 1% of enterprises consider their digital transformation strategy mature. 1%. Hershey's made mistakes in 1999, but these numbers are from 2025. The pattern hasn't changed, so history does repeat itself. With one caveat. Only if we allow it to. The first step in preventing such mistakes is knowing where you stand. And if you enjoyed what we did here today with this Hershey's case study, then go to the link down below to check.occhium.com and you will find the same 5 questions there. Answer them and I will offer you a personal analysis of your business so you know where you stand before investing another penny in software or AI. I will review your input myself and send you a clear analysis within 24 hours. No automated emails. Promise. If you liked this video and found it insightful, next week we turn IBM's digital transformation into a case study. Today's case was a small fish. Next week's is a blue whale. 7,000 people involved, $4 billion invested, partnered with the leading organizations worldwide, and still a failure. See you next week.